Hi everyone, how are you? Are you having a good week so far? For this week's reading blog, I was in a classics mood and I wanted to dive into a couple of classics that I have on my long-standing TBR. So I think I'm gonna be reading 3 books this week, and I've settled on Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy, which isn't this cover, just everything. So this is about a woman named Bathsheba Everdeen who attracts a lot of suitors while living in the English countryside. So Thomas Hardy is known for his very grim stories. So I'm a little apprehensive about going into this story. I'm expecting a lot of heartbreak, a lot of betrayal, just, all the fun things that just really gets me excited about a book, I guess. Second book I'll be reading is And Then There Were None by Miss Agatha Christie. I picked this one up mainly because I did the TBR jar thing for August, and this was one of my picks. This book also takes place in London, which is apparently a theme for all of my books, this vlog. It's about 10 people who are invited to this place called Soldier Island under mysterious circumstances. And they basically get picked off one by one, and everyone's trying to figure out who the murderer is. I'm excited about this one because I love a good murder mystery, especially after reading Finlay Donovan last week. I'm in a mystery mood. So we'll see if this lives up to the hype, because this is a classic. I read this in middle school, so hopefully, and I remember liking it, so hopefully I like it again. We shall see. So the last book I'm gonna be reading is Persuasion by Miss Jane Austen. Oh, I don't know if the lights are gonna be able to see this. Oh, maybe. All I know is that this book is about second chance love. But this is the third chance I am giving to Miss Austen. I have high hopes though, because it is a shorter book, way shorter than Emma or Pride and Prejudice. But if I hate this book, I don't think I can give her another shot. It's just too sad when you hate a classically loved novel. I hate having a differing opinion about Pride and Prejudice and Emma. It's the fandom for those classic novels are crazy. So please, book gods, let me like this one. All right, I will check in with you in a bit. Hi friends. So just a little update. I finished Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. Excuse the wet hair. I am going to an interview later on today. So I'm just getting ready for that. I actually have 2 interviews this week. Quite the busy week for me, but book talk. So I finished Far from the Madding Crowd, and if you saw from my reading B-roll, my cover came apart, which is so freaking sad because I am obsessed with this cover. So I'm so mad that fell apart. It's fine, everything's fine. But anyways, so I'm just gonna be putting on my makeup right now. So Far from the Madding Crowd, I loved it. Spoiler alert. Thomas Hardy is usually known for very grim stories, I guess. So I was a little apprehensive going into this, thinking that it was going to be, really sad and heartbreaking and emotional, which it was sad in some parts after you see kind of like what the characters go through and their like character growth, but like it ended up okay at the end. I'm not usually a romance girly, but I do like my classics that are romances and then some fantasy as well, as long as it's not like the whole story. I don't mind romance, but contemporary romance is not usually my jam either. This was everything though. I loved it. The prose was fantastic. The way like Thomas Hardy like weaved the story together was so good. It took me a little while for me to get into the language of the book, because I know like it takes like a different part of your brain, or I don't know if it takes more brain power, at least for me, maybe I'm a big dummy, but it took me, I want to say like a couple hours at least for me to kind of like get in groove with the language itself. So for me, the easiest way to do that is by listening to the audio while reading along at the same time. That for me always makes it so much easier for me to comprehend what's going on. So the story has multiple POVs. We have Gabriel Oak and Bathsheba Everdeen, which that is the coolest name ever. I have a cat named Barnabas, and I feel like we should get him a friend named Bathsheba. I think that'd be so cute. It was such an interesting character arc for Bathsheba. So initially you see her kind of go from this like really vain, like foolish girl who constantly looks at her own reflection. You know, she's one of those type of girlies. She sends a Valentine to this guy just so he'll notice her, not because she's actually interested in him, just because she's like trying to flirt with him, but she's not even really interested. But eventually you do see her turn into like a very wise, like sympathetic woman, because she goes through a lot of like trials, you know, that force her to kind of reevaluate her life. Initially, I found her character like super annoying. She's very young at the beginning of the book. I want to say she's like in her like teens, or like late teens, I think. So initially I couldn't stand her, but I realized obviously that she's gonna go through, you know, a growing up period, so I knew it was just gonna take time. Gabriel Oak's character arc was also really interesting as well. So he proposes to Bathsheba very early in the story, like 50 pages in. And when Bathsheba says no, because she's like not, you know, in love with him, he gets like really upset and like kind of angry over it. The thing that frustrates me the most is that everyone looks at Bathsheba as like property. But I mean, I'm sure that was unfortunately a circumstance of the time period. But still, it's one of the reasons why I have such a hard time reading classics sometimes, and why I end up loving classics where they kind of step out of the gender norms. For example, Bathsheba ends up inheriting her uncle's farm, and she ends up running it just as on her own. She enlists Gabriel to actually help her because they end up separating for a while, and then they end up coming back together. And so he's helping her on her farm, but it's her farm. And coincidentally, what ends up happening is there's a line of suitors that end up trying to marry her just because she has all of these prospects, aside from being apparently gorgeous, which is always stated in the book constantly. Initially though, Gabriel, like I said, he kind of thinks of her as like not necessarily property, but he wants to own her, you know, like he wants her to be his wife. He like sees a future for them, but like Bathsheba's so young that she can't see this, and she also thinks that she has so many other prospects, so why settle down? Eventually though, Gabriel does begin to respect her and see her as like an individual person. He still thinks that she's like incredibly foolish, especially when he finds out that she sent this like Valentine to someone who's like not even interested in her. And in turn, this guy becomes obsessed with her because he thinks that Bathsheba's interested in him when she's not. She has no interest in this guy whatsoever. So Gabriel calls her out for these things, and through all of these interactions though, Bathsheba's starting to grow up and she's like realizing, you know, and empathizing with people that she can't really treat them, you know, as such anymore. It was such a beautiful coming of age story, especially for Bathsheba. You know, it's about devotion, stepping outside of the gender roles, like during this time period. So I found it really fascinating. And it was such a sweet story because, I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it was a beautiful story and I loved it. 4.5 stars, I think. I think I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. I would definitely recommend this to people who love stories, anything historical fiction. But there is something to keep in mind that it is a classic, and because it is a classic, it will take some time for your brain to kind of adjust to the language. And for me, the best way to do that is to definitely listen to the audio while reading it. But also, I really want to watch the adaptation. I think it's with Carey Mulligan, but it's an easier way for your mind to kind of grapple with the story and like understand what was going on. Because sometimes, I mean, even for me, I've been reading classics for at least a couple of years now. Even for me, when I switch back from modern literature to classics, it does take some time for my brain to kind of adjust. But now I'm obsessed. So next, I think I'm gonna pick up Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. So I will check in with you later when... It's a short book, so I might just check in with you when I'm all done with the book. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. So I finished And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And honestly, I'm just kind of meh over it. The story was good. Like, I found the mystery very engaging and interesting, I guess. Like, but the writing itself was so matter of fact and kind of boring. Like, I wanted more atmospheric language describing the setting. The setting's supposed to take place in, like, England on an island. And it's supposed to be this, like, creepy mansion. And so the vibes were there, but it wasn't very descriptive. So it was like, it was okay. While reading it, so normally I pride myself in being able to figure out who the killer is, like in a mystery, either in like a movie or TV show, book, whatever. But I honestly had no idea who it was. And in truth, it's not even like you really had that much foreshadowing for who the killer was while reading the book itself. You really didn't know until like the epilogue, I guess. So it wasn't even, there was no way to know, which I don't like that in a mystery. I like for there to be like clever clues. I also assumed that this story was going to be way more clever than it actually was. While reading it, I almost thought maybe everyone was the killer, you know, like maybe some of the guests kind of knew each other or knew of each other, and they have, like, maybe they all had a grudge against someone else. And it ended up not being as clever as I assumed it was going to be, which is also very disappointing. Like, I almost thought it was going to be like murders of unfortunate circumstance, but it was not. There was also so many characters to keep track of, like 10 characters. There were so many, I almost considered like drawing character maps for each of the people, because 10 people to keep track of, their names also with their like professions and stuff like that. It was so hard for me to keep track of, and I was not a fan. Yeah. It was too many moving pieces on the chessboard, and it was not fun. Like, the story was engaging, but I don't know if I'd ever call this fun. This wasn't a fun read. Usually when I read mysteries, I think they're fun. I think it's fun to figure out who the killer is, but this one just kind of fell flat for me. All in all, I think I'm gonna give this 3 stars. Like, it's not great, but it wasn't bad by any means. All in all, it was fine. I'm probably also just being picky because I like mysteries, but I like clever mysteries. And for me, this just didn't feel very clever, I guess. I am just coming off reading Finlay Donovan is Killing It, I think, which I found very clever, which is why I liked it so much. So coming from that to this, which is like a cozy mystery to like a traditional mystery, I don't know, maybe I'm just not a traditional mystery girly. Last but not least, I am gonna be reading Miss Jane Austen, Persuasion, to be exact. Fingers crossed, this one goes better than the other 2 books I've read, which is Emma and Pride and Prejudice. I just did not have a good time with either of those. So fingers crossed, this one's way better. I'll update you in just a bit. So sorry if you can hear a lot of noise. I'm using a different microphone, and then my husband is also working in the corner over there. So I'm about to run out the door. I'm gonna head to the gym, but I wanted to give you an update. I am reading Persuasion. I'm currently listening to the book on audio and also reading the book on my Kindle. I have the physical copy, but it's such a nice like edition that I don't like carrying it around because I don't want it to get all like dinged up and stuff, but it's also like so much more heavier than my Kindle. So, and it was like free on Kindle anyways. So I'm currently 65% through the book. It's a second chance romance about Anne Elliot, who is the main character, and Captain Wentworth. 8 years prior, Anne and Captain Wentworth were engaged. And what happened was basically a bunch of people in Anne's life persuaded her to not marry Captain Wentworth because he didn't have any prospects or like any like nobility or anything like that. So they ended up breaking off their engagement. And now fast forward to current time in the book, it's 8 years later. They meet each other again. And Captain Wentworth has come back from the war, and now he has like prospects, he has like money, and I don't know if he has a title, but he has notoriety from being in the war. So I'm enjoying the plot of this one so much better. It's a shorter book, so I feel like the plot actually moves way faster, which is great because in the past when I read Jane Austen's books, I think I read Emma and I read Pride and Prejudice. And while I enjoyed those I appreciated for what they were, you know, classic novels with like the classic tropes, I found them so long and drawn out. Emma, for example, it's supposed to be known for its like witty banter between characters, but it was so long. Like, she could have shaved off like 250 pages from that book and you would have had the same story. I did enjoy Pride and Prejudice though, but it was kind of the same thing. It felt really long and drawn out. Like, I know she's supposed to be known for her slow burn romances, but sometimes it's too freaking slow and I'm gonna lose interest, you know? So I'm 65% of the way through the book right now, and there really hasn't even been that many interactions between Anne and Captain Wentworth. They're actually kind of courting other people. So Captain Wentworth is courting this girl. She's very young. I think she's like a teenager. And he's, mind you, supposed to be in his 30s, I believe. He's courting this girl named Louisa, and she's very young. And then Anne is actually being kind of courted by this man named William Elliot, which is like her cousin. Ew. I don't know why all of these classic novels have a tendency to try and pair marriages between cousins. I mean, were those the only prospects people had back then? Like I said, this plot is moving so much quicker, which, thank God. I don't know if I could honestly stomach another Jane Austen novel that I felt like drawn out an additional 200 pages. But I am actually having fun reading this book. I am excited every single time to pick up the book, which I have never experienced while reading a Jane Austen novel, so I'm very happy about that. Anyways, I will update you again probably when I finish the book, because I think I have about another 2 hours or so on the book left, so I will update you when I finish it. Dare I say it, I think I am in my classic lit era again. I loved it. It was such like a sweet and endearing story, and I was so happy with the ending. It was so good. I will say there wasn't even that many interactions between Anne and Captain Wentworth, but from Anne's point of view, like, she was kind of pining over him and thinking about him pretty much all throughout the book. But like, obviously she was still in love with him, and you didn't really know how he felt until the very end of the story, obviously. But it was only a matter of time before he revealed his true feelings. It was so sweet. I'm gonna rate it 4 stars, mainly because my epitome of a 5-star read is like Jane Eyre. That is my classic literature favorite of all time. So I always hold that at like the highest standard, and I compare pretty much every book to that. So Jane Eyre being my 5-star, do I consider this any better? No. So I definitely would give it like a 4, but I am obsessed. It was so good. I definitely think I want to pick up more classics now, but if you would have saw my previous video, I did a TBR jar, but I have all these other books that I am also excited for, but now I'm just like, classics are just like my jam right now. I had such a good time reading this one and reading Far from the Madding Crowd. I had a great reading week so far. And then There Were None, I could have took it or left it. It wasn't my favorite. I don't know. We'll see if my mood changes and I completely scrap all the books I did for my TBR jar, but I don't know. When my mood changes, I cannot be stopped. All right, that wraps up everything for now. Have you read any classic lit that you are absolutely obsessed with? If so, please leave a comment down below and tell me which is your favorite, because I am always looking for new recommendations. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.